We want to respect the time of everyone. I know that Ms. Sadler has a constituent obligation, and she will need to leave a little early, around 9:45-ish, but we want to wrap up by 10:30. So I did want to welcome everyone. I will bring to order the James City County School Board is now in session, and I will pass it over to Mayor Friley. You can bring your board to order.
Sure. The March 15th meeting of the Williamsburg City Council is now in order. Ms. Burcham, would you call the roll, please?
I do.
Maslin.
Here.
Ms. Ramsey. Here. Mayor Friley.
Here.
Vice Mayor Pons. Mr. Dang.
Here. Call this meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors to order. Mr. Stevens, the roll, please.
Mr. Hippel? Here. Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon? Here. Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
And Ms. Surzo, can you call our board roll call?
Here.
Here.
Ms. Hummel.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mrs. Young.
Here.
Here. I just wanted to remind everyone that the microphones do pick up ambient noise, so just ruffling of papers, just be aware of that. I wanted to apologize for Ms. Taylor, who has work obligations, and she is unable to be here today for that. But again, I wanted to thank each and every person for coming today, representing their boards. I'm grateful for the partnership the school board has with our funding partners. We're here today primarily to update the City Council and the James City County Board of Supervisors on the school division's FY 2020 operating budget, but we will also provide some additional information on specific CIP or capital improvement plan topics, as well as have a discussion of the 5-year CIP timeline. I wanted to highlight that we are one of those elite school divisions who can boast that all 16 of our WJCC schools continue to be fully accredited, and we've been able to do that for 11 consecutive years in a row. We employ over 57 nationally board certified teachers. In 2018, our WJCC grads received approximately $24 million in college scholarships. WJCC continues to serve an increasing number of students with disabilities, English language learners, economically disadvantaged, behaviorally challenged, and homeless students. But with that, WJCC is able to meet the diverse needs of its students despite the fact that there's very little funding coming from the federal or the state government. As you know, the vast majority of that funding is coming from our local funding partners, the city and the county, with those dollars representing approximately 65% of our budget. And we thank you very much for that. Even though the feds and the state continue to legislate underfunded mandates, and we'll talk some more about that today, the division with financial support from the city and the county continues to elevate beyond excellence. This year we've kicked off a new strategic plan and have tied our strategic goals directly to our budget. I know staff are eager to provide an update on the FY 2020 budget, so without further ado, I will pass it over to Dr. Hiram.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, Mayor Freiling, Mr. Eisenhower, board members and City Council members. We are delighted to present a summary of the Superintendent's proposed budget this morning. This budget proposal supports over 12,000 students, including pre-K, 16 schools and over 1,700 employees. As Ms. Ownby has already stated, our schools are a valued integral part of Williamsburg, James and James City County. We are fortunate to have the strong support of our community and the respect of our parents, business leaders and elected officials. You have consistently invested in our schools, our teachers and our students, and we are very grateful for your ongoing support. And we know you receive a strong return on investment. The proposed fiscal year 20 budget is designed to build upon that history of achievement. As Ms. Ownby has referenced, the budget is purposefully aligned with the goals of the new strategic plan, Elevate Beyond Excellence. Its key priorities include employee compensation, meeting the needs of all students, safety and security, and most important of all, teaching and learning. Our most important resource in WJC schools is people. Going beyond excellence requires attracting and retaining great people, teachers, administrators, support employees, all of whom contribute to the positive environment that makes it possible for every student to learn. Providing fair compensation is a priority. Therefore, this budget includes an investment of $3.8 million in our valued employees to move us closer to the regional market average in salaries. This morning, you will notice that the budget proposal is informed by data. We will provide data about teacher salaries, comparative staffing levels with region and peer divisions in key positions, and comparative teacher-student ratios in areas where we have the greatest academic challenges, such as special education and English learners. Teaching and learning is at the heart of what we do. The proposed budget includes an additional $1 million to fund instructional programs and additional instructional personnel. This budget also invests in educational equity. That is, making sure every student has what he or she needs to be successful. Our student population is becoming more diverse, which is a positive thing, but it is imperative that we have the resources to meet the individual needs of all students. Therefore, over $500,000 is invested in additional staff and resources to address the growing special education and English learner populations. Safety and security remains a priority for the school division, with over $500,000 invested in additional counsellors and security officers. Of note also, a comprehensive review and realignment of funds from various departments and budget lines has enabled us to realise $1.5 million in savings, which is part of this budget. With a fully funded budget, we will be able to meet the essential needs of our students and appropriately compensate our employees. Ms. Ewing, our Chief Financial Officer, will now lead the presentation of the Superintendent's proposed budget. Thank you, Ms. Ewing.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Good morning. So, state code requires the superintendent to prepare a needs-based budget to present to the school board for consideration. This is not a wish list. It is a data-driven estimate of what is required to provide the highest quality education possible to the children of our community. Considerable work has gone into developing the superintendent's proposed budget. This FY20 plan is a balance of meeting established school board priorities related to the strategic plan, Elevate Beyond Excellence, a review of available revenue, and meeting the division needs for the upcoming fiscal year as outlined from each of our cost center managers. Throughout the budget process, school administration made decisions based on one overarching question: what is the best for all students and staff? When we began putting together the FY20 budget, we were using the governor's proposed budget, including his recommendation for a 5% employee raise and revisions to the standards of quality. As a reminder, the SOQs are the minimum requirements that must be met by all Virginia public schools and school divisions. The General Assembly passed its budget at the end of last month, which differs from the governor's plan. On this slide, you see our anticipated revenues from the General Assembly budget, which is an increase of $2.1 million over the current year. Now let's talk for just a minute about how the state determines the locality's ability to fund their local schools. The composite index is the state's measurement of each locality's ability to pay for public education. The formula takes into consideration the changes in property values and taxes, the local income and retail sales, and compares it to that for the entire state. Much of our funding is derived from a per pupil cost multiplied by 1 minus the composite index. So theoretically speaking, the lower the composite index should lead to additional state funding, while a higher composite index would result in less state funding. As the LCI increases, state funding goes down with the expectation that the locality will be able to contribute more. The LCI is supposed to be an indicator of the wealth of the locality. If it goes up, the locality is deemed to have increased wealth and will be able to provide additional funding to its programs. As you can see on this slide, Williamsburg and James City County have the highest LCI of any locality in our region. Unfortunately, that means fewer state dollars for our schools and an increased dependence on our local funding partners. Understanding that, school administration and the school board work diligently to review data, trends, and essential increases to develop a responsible, needs-based budget. As you might imagine, enrollment is a key component of the budget development process. Enrollment estimates drive our estimated revenue and our staffing model. We use FutureThink to assist and guide us with enrollment information and trends. This view provides a historical perspective with regard to enrollment within the division as of September 30th each year. Enrollment fluctuates daily, but September 30th is a benchmarking assessment for funding at the state level. Based on the low enrollment projection for FY20, we are anticipating an increase of 9 students next year. For the current year, the Future Think low projection was 11,492, and our actual enrollment is 11,461, which is an accuracy rate of 99.73%. In addition to enrollment data, we use the strategic plan's principles and priorities to guide the development of the budget to ensure that the goals align with the plan and that it supports the needs and goals of the school division. Aligned with Goal 1 of the strategic plan, which focuses on academic achievement and college and career readiness, you will see additional instructional staff, including 2 early childhood special education teachers, an instructional assistant, and a half FTE for a social studies coordinator to increase the position to full-time. The additional teaching positions for Bright Beginnings are based on the needs of current 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, as well as projected students' needs for next school year. Increases for our instructional program amount to approximately $320,000 and includes anticipated increases for New Horizons, additional licensing fees for instructional technology, funds to support new high school course offerings, funds to expand the use of an interactive online math tool that supports the standards of learning, and funds for a career investigation software in order to meet the requirements of profile of a Virginia graduate. Based on previous budget conversations with the board, Dr. Herron has also included funding for an assistant principal at each middle school. These positions are crucial as building leaders are charged with multiple tasks, from leading an increasing number of special education meetings to handling student discipline matters to guiding instruction and staff development. The additional staffing has been identified as an essential need across all middle schools. As you can see from this slide, with the exception of Poquoson, WJCC is the only division that does not have a full-time social studies coordinator. In fact, a few of them not only have full-time coordinators, but also employ specialists to specifically work with elementary and secondary schools. In light of the fact that over time the duties of the coordinator have expanded, the number of schools in WJCC has increased, and there are additional responsibilities due to Virginia Department of Education mandates, we believe that there is a need for WJCC to join its peers and employ a full-time social studies coordinator. This slide shows the average number of assistant principals per middle and high school in our regional and like school divisions. This shows the needed support for schools and leadership teams across our secondary schools. It is critical that we continue to enhance visibility and provide increased teacher support while continuing to build our administrative capacity over time. Most importantly, this will positively impact the overall success of our schools to include the academic growth of all students. Goal 2 of the strategic plan focuses on equity. Expenditure increases here are primarily for personnel to support the division's rapidly growing English learner and special education populations. The data demonstrates a critical need in these areas. There is also a half FTE for a gifted resource teacher to strengthen our ability to screen for and provide gifted services. Ms. Bourgeois, Senior Director for Student Services, will now share additional information with you related to the personnel requests for special education.
Good morning. Each year, school divisions are required to submit a December 1 count of students receiving special education services. This moment in time becomes the basis for special education funding. As you can see, special education is an area in which WJCC has experienced some significant growth. Over the last 10 years, the population has grown by 365 students. We have also seen a growth in the number of students with more complex disabilities. We are committed to providing each student with the services and supports needed to provide an appropriate education. This chart provides trend data for special education enrollment and special education staffing for the past 6 years. You will see an increase of 151 students from December 1, 2017 to December 1, 2018. This increase includes 106 K-12 students who are newly identified as a student with a disability, a 65% increase in the age 2 category, which is served through our Bright Beginnings. State code requires each school division to ensure that all children with disabilities aged 2 to 21 inclusive residing in that school division have a right to a free public education. A 20% increase in the developmental delay category. It also includes a 9% increase in students with autism, a 12% increase in students with the primary disability of speech language impairment. This does not capture students who may have speech as a secondary disability or a related service. And also an increase of 50 students in the specific learning disability and other health impairment categories. To set our request in context, this chart compares our teacher-staff ratio to other school divisions. The WJCC numbers you see here were provided are an update from the PowerPoint originally provided. That had last year's numbers, so we've updated it to indicate this year's numbers with the increase of 151 students.
Thank you, Ms. Bourgeois. Ms. DePaula, Senior Director for Curriculum and Instruction, will now share with you additional information related to our English language learner population and staffing.
I wanted to ask a question, if I could, to Ms. Bourgeois. Do you know what the growth has been like with the like school divisions that we had the previous comparison on?
We did look at that. Some of them are seeing upward trends also. I don't know that this year is we're interested. We're trying to determine why it was such a large growth, but everybody has had upward trends, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. As you can see, WJCC's English learner population has grown significantly over the past 10 years. Over these years, WJCC's L's population has increased by 535 students, but the numbers of these English learners does not tell the complete story of need. The Virginia Standards of Quality require a minimum staffing ratio of 1 ESL teacher for every 59 English learners. Please keep in mind that this is the minimum requirement and does not take into account the varying needs of students with lower language proficiency, interrupted education, and acclimation into our community. We've seen a steady increase in the number of L's with lower English language proficiency levels, also known as ELP. As you can see, 62% of all L's are proficiency level 3 or below, 34% of L's are level 2 or below, 83% of K2 students are proficiency level 3 or below, and that's particularly important because numerous studies have found that students who can't read on grade level by 3rd grade are at risk of not graduating by age 19 compared to a child who does read proficiently by that time. And finally, 73% of L's in grade 9 through 12 are ELP 3 or below, which is a factor that has significant impact on on-time graduation. SOQs do not take into account the language level of students. They represent the minimum number of ESL teachers required to provide services for our L's. Staffing at this ratio does not take into account our ELP level 1 and 2 students' need for increased direct support. Some school divisions choose to use a level of need model to staff ESL teachers, weighing the level of support for those students at level 2 or below, higher than students at 3, 4, or 5. Department of Defense Education Activity, or DODEA, has a method of weighing L students based on the level of need for support and a recommended ratio of 1 teacher for every L student. For example, students with an ELP of 1 are weighted 3 points. Students at ELP 2 are rated 2 points. ELP 3 and 4 students are 1 point, and monitored students, or level 5 and above, are half a point. They do not receive direct services from English Language Services. Our current L enrollment is 730 students, served by 15 ESL teachers. Using the DODEA level of need weighting method, our EL enrollment by need would be 1,012 students. If we apply the Virginia SOQ staffing ratio to WJCC's weighted L enrollment number, a 1:59 ratio would require 17 ESL teachers. If we're staffing at the DODEA recommended ratio of 1:40, we would need 25 teachers. In this slide, you can see that compared to our surrounding and like school divisions, WJCC has the highest ESL teacher to student ratio. The addition of 2 ESL teachers would bring our ratio to 1:43, in line with York County.
Thank you, Ms. DePaula. Safety and security of students and staff remain a priority. That is reflected in Goal 4 of the strategic plan. The budget proposal includes 5 additional school counselors originally added to comply with the governor's proposed changes in the standards of quality. Technology updates include licensing for enhanced security for Windows and Office 365. Finally, under this goal, we've included security officers for each middle school who work in tandem with administrators and the school resource officers. Last month's anniversary of the Parkland shooting served as a painful reminder that we must never be complacent when it comes to school safety. Beginning July 1st, school counselors will be required to spend 80% of their time during the normal school day providing direct counseling services to students. Direct counseling services include individual counseling sessions, small group counseling, core counseling curriculum, individual student planning, as well as crisis response services. Current school counselor-to-student ratios allow for WJCC school counselors to spend, on average, 40.1% of their time providing direct counseling services to students. Adding 5 school counselors is necessary to increase the amount of time school counselors are able to spend providing direct counseling services to students and to ensure WJCC is able to make progress towards the new mandated counselor work time. Current SOQ ratios for school counselors are elementary 500-1, middle 400-1, high school 350-1. The General Assembly's budget reduced these ratios to elementary 455-1, middle school 370-1, and high school 325-1. WJCC's current ratios are some of the highest for elementary and middle schools and the highest for high school counselor-to-student ratios when compared to neighboring and like school divisions. We believe that adding 5 school counselors is imperative to creating a safe, healthy, and supportive school environment to ensure students' abilities to fully access and be successful in the learning environment.
So how much of this, how much is the Commonwealth paying towards that mandate?
Basically 1.5 additional counselors when they readjusted the ratio. Originally, they were paying for 5 more, and that would have meant school division paid 111,000, and the state paid 111,000, and we paid the rest. Now it's only 1.5 required SOQ.
Thank you.
Does that include the composite index?
Yes, and that does not include the mandate to meet the 80-20. Just as an aside, we have implemented a tool this year where counsellors are tracking every single hour very carefully to show the amount of direct services they have. So the number 40.1% is a real number in terms of allocated time to direct services. And we're hoping to increase that with current staff by the end of the year, but we will need more staff to meet the 80%.
This slide shows which school divisions in our region employ security officers in addition to their school resource officer at middle schools. The addition of school security officers directly supports Strategic Plan Goal 4, Safety and Security. Additionally, this enhances visibility in the building and supports the efforts of school leadership teams as they focus on promoting high academic success for all students in a safe and orderly environment. You will notice that we are using our neighboring divisions for comparison here rather than our traditional like schools used for academics. The reason for this is that many of our like school divisions are more rural. When considering security and safety, our region is actually a better comparison. Another area where we must be vigilant is employee compensation. We have an incomparable team of teachers, administrators, and support employees. In order to retain those high-quality employees and remain competitive with neighboring divisions in our recruitment efforts, we must provide the best salary and benefits possible. To that end, the FY20 budget proposal includes an average 4% salary adjustment for eligible employees. For teachers, that is a step increase and an average 2.5% raise. For other employees, it's an average of 4%. We know that our families and community appreciate the dedication of our staff and value all they do for children in our schools. We would love to offer an even bigger increase to our employees. They deserve it. Unfortunately, without additional revenue, we cannot implement a larger raise without cuts to vital programs.
Just to clarify, this is with eligible employees. You touched on teachers, but this also touches on administrators as well.
Administrators and support.
So would be assistant principals.
All this raise would be for all employees. Every single time we've created a raise within our school system, it's for all. And really what's driving that is our strategic plan goals. Our strategies say they want to strengthen recruitment for all employees, to build a 5-year compensation plan for all employees, and one of our key things is to value employees, all of them within the workplace, and we feel that to offer to all is what we would recommend and propose.
We do continue to offer 3 excellent healthcare plan options that include health, dental, and vision for a very reasonable price. On this slide, you also see the healthcare increase of approximately $330,000. Based on guidance from the school board, the minimal increase of 1.5% will be offset by employee contributions. Therefore, we show it as an expense here, but as a savings later in the presentation. Mr. Baker, Senior Director for Human Resources, will now share additional information related to compensation.
Good morning. So why is compensation so important? We know our families and our community appreciate the dedication of our staff and the value all they do for our children in our school, but it goes beyond that. Nationally, there's a growing trend for the need for more teachers and the declining pool of candidates. Fewer people are choosing to become teachers, and many of those who do are leaving the profession after just a few years. Therefore, in order to attract and retain highly qualified teachers, we must be competitive with our pay. This slide shows our regional ranking for pay with teachers with a bachelor's degree. For new teachers just entering the workforce, WJCC is 7th out of 9 school divisions. We don't see a significant shift in our ranking until the 25th year mark, where we move to number 3. We have a small number of teachers earning longevity pay at 25 years. If you include that funding, it skews the data a bit by showing WJCC schools at the top of the ranking. But again, only a small number of teachers receive the grandfathered longevity pay.
Can I just ask one question? And the tables you provided, which are very helpful. Have a
I'm sure we could. I don't have it today, but the next slide shows the actual entry-level salary for new teachers with a bachelor's degree. Again, we are among the lowest at $43,000. Our ranking actually gets worse for teachers with a master's degree. In comparison to other school divisions, we are at the very bottom until we hit the 10-year mark. And then WJCC is 8th out of the 9 school divisions. You see here the longevity pay impact actually gets to the 25th to 30th years of service. Here you see the starting pay for teachers with a master's degree. ours is $44,500 and is the lowest of these 9 school divisions. With salaries and rankings like this, you can see why hiring and retaining high-quality teachers continues to be a challenge for us. Improved compensation must continue to be a priority for us. As the superintendent mentioned, it's worth noting that to support Goal 5 of the strategic plan, we are developing a 5-year compensation plan to make the division more competitive in the region. That is a bit of a moving target because other school divisions are surely doing the same thing. Our ability to compensate, to be competitive is dependent on some extent on how aggressive other school divisions are going to be.
One question. The health care increase is being borne by the employees.
Yes, sir.
To what degree does that offset the pay raise? Because I've heard complaints before that, okay, I got a pay raise, but it was all eaten up with the health care increase, so.
I think
Basically, the amount that would transfer to the employees is about 300,000, but that's a small percentage increase in health care compared to putting money in their salary, and then employees can choose the level of health care that they actually want to have. So for the first time ever, we've actually transferred that across to put more emphasis on our compensation package on salary rather than benefits.
Okay.
In the region, we're actually up there at the top in benefits, and we're down in compensation or in salary, and we're trying to shift that so that we put more in their pockets and provide choice, and then are more competitive in the region. New teachers generally are more interested in their salary than anything else when they come in, and so to attract them, good teachers at the beginning of their teaching careers is vital.
Do you know how many of your how many of your staff take advantage of your benefits that you offer?
about, I believe, 3/4.
So there are some that do not, but they would be penalized, so to speak, if you kept putting it instead of pushing some of it onto the employee.
Anecdotally, you could talk about the pay raise is for everybody. It helps your retirement versus health insurance. 3/4 of the employees take that.
Okay, thank you.
When we speak about entry-level teachers, are they all equal? Or does a high school entry-level teacher make the same amount of money as a middle school, as an elementary school? And does it differ at all by subject taught? In other words, or is it just, it's
based on years.
$44,500?
It's based on years of service.
So brand new teachers would all get the same, but if we bring someone in at 10 years, they would get the equivalent to 10 years on the teacher scale.
I had a question to share with the group that maybe they would be interested in knowing. The MA, the master's entry level versus entry level without a master's. So I'm thinking all the students that are in, like William and Mary, JMU, they're all coming, those fresh teachers all have their masters, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could kind of explain kind of the profile of our entry-level teachers with masters versus our teachers that are entry-level without masters.
Sure, thank you. Good question. This past year, we hired approximately 120 teachers, and out of those teachers that had 0 years of experience, that was their first teaching job, we had 10 that had a bachelor's only, and we had 22 that had a master's with no experience. So we hire more with the masters.
Can I comment on that? The state, in its infinite wisdom, has reversed a decision they made many, many years ago, where they dropped elementary or secondary education degrees in all our colleges and universities, and everybody had to get basically two degrees. Not 2 degrees, but they had to have a major in an arts and science area, plus they took all the coursework to get certified. Well, due to the fact that there's a shrinking job pool, they have reversed that decision, and many schools will now reintroduce undergraduate programs that have an elementary education major. So we may actually see an increase in the number that don't have a master's degree simply because there's going to be that shift is going to take place. That's all.
Mr. Baker mentioned the fact that, I need to move over, that the switch that we're doing in moving more of the pay instead of benefits more to salary is because one of the things that happens when you're an older teacher, as many of you know, if you've only received benefits, you don't get credit for Social Security and retirement for having good benefits. You only get credit for having good pay. And so that's one of the reasons we're making this switch, and it's to me, it's probably one of the best things that we can do for our employees.
Thank you.
Before we move on, just in response to Dr. McGlennon's question about average salary, one of the reasons that staff broke out the by year, by length of service, is that our average salary masks disparities between our newer employees and our older employees. And as our longevity pay employees begin to retire, that average is going to drop pretty briskly, I think.
And I appreciate that, and that's part of the reason I asked the question, actually, is because I think that we do have an issue in terms of the amount of compensation funding in aggregate that we provide and the distribution of that money in some ways. That's not to say that the people with longevity don't have great benefit for the system, but it is an issue that really does require, and I'm pleased that the school board and administration are acting to address this through the health care component of it, but some way of recognizing that some of our greatest challenges are at the entry level, and that we're not only trying to, I think, attract the very best teachers that we can new to the system, and I think we have a pretty good track record on retention of our teachers. But I think to get a full picture of things, it really does help to get a sense of, is it just that, we just need more money, and obviously we need more money for everything, or are there some strategies that can be pursued that will help us to be more competitive at the entry level, to be more effective at diversifying our new teacher pool, and those kinds of questions. And as we talked about this, the notion that when you look at teacher pay, we're down at the bottom. When you look at pay plus benefits, we are much higher overall. It does sort of suggest that there is some opportunity there to re-strategize about some of these questions. Just kind of curious about that. Thanks.
If I could add too, just going back to Mr. Eisenhower's with regard to the health insurance, as Ms. Ewing pointed out, we do have 3 levels of health insurance, and so with one of our plans, there was actually a cost savings. So teachers would have the ability to pick of the 3 plans. So in terms of the increase eating or taking away the raise, they have some choices with which plan they go with.
I think just as another point of reference, our 120 new teachers, I think about a third of them were brand new. We actually attracted 2/3 from other divisions who have a significant number of years of experience. So that average salary, or the salary at 10 or 15 years of teaching, becomes very important as well to keep attracting from other divisions. We were very fortunate to be fully staffed at the beginning of the year and have been every year, unlike many of our surrounding systems, and we want to keep it that way and attract the absolute best.
One of those things too, since we're attracting a lot of experienced teachers, those teachers come with families and kids, and might be interested in having those benefits that maybe the younger teachers don't. Well, also, if we look at the teaching profession in general, and we're having problems with a teacher pool, having kids choose teaching as a profession, having them come into the system, or coming into any system, coming into the profession, and then leaving 2 to 3 years. It's the whole temperament of the profession. I mean, we used to have teacher assistants in every of our elementary classrooms, and so we took that away from them, but we didn't unburden the teachers. As a matter of fact, we burdened them further by having larger class sizes. We burdened them further by having more documentation and more individual learning plans. And so as we keep adding to
what we ask of our teachers, that just puts more pressure on the profession, and that affects you not only in just teacher population, but diversity as well. So, I mean, if the, rising tide lifts all ships, a falling tide lowers all ships. And that's kind of where we are in our profession, in the teaching profession right now. We have to kind of look at that holistically as a society, as what are we asking of our teachers, and how do we make it more attractive as a profession, which is salary, which is benefits, which is teacher's assistants. It's also the demands on the job. So just off my soapbox now.
Moving on to budgetary expenditures related to Goal 6 of the strategic plan, you will see approximately $13,000 allocated for technology services. This covers additional licensing for Synergy, our student data system, to support online registration. We also have a number of savings in Goal 6, which is not surprising given that the goal focuses on organizational efficiency. On this slide, you will see savings from reductions in utilities, phone services, and attrition. This is also where you see the healthcare increase as a savings because it is being offset by the employee contribution. In total, we have nearly $1.6 million in savings through budget reductions and savings. We move back out to the macro level and look at our operating expenditures as a whole, you will see that our focus is exactly where it should be, instruction. As indicated on this slide, instruction makes up 73% of our spending by function. Earlier, I shared the General Assembly's FY20 budget with you and explained that when we began putting our budget together, we only had the governor's proposed budget as our guide. Since then, we've received the General Assembly's budget and looked at the anticipated revenues, and we are expecting approximately $248,000 less in state revenue than what is presented in the superintendent's proposed budget. In summary, our estimated revenue adjustments based on the approved General Assembly budget and projected contributions from our local funding partners is $3,747,609. Our total mandatory and essential expenditure increases that are within the superintendent's proposed budget totals $6,293,511. We have also received information regarding an anticipated increase to our workers' compensation insurance premium, which amounts to approximately $55,000. However, based on updated information from New Horizons, we can decrease the amount that is currently in the superintendent's proposed budget by approximately $57,000. The bottom line is that once you factor in the $1.58 million in savings from realignment, efficiencies, and attrition, we need an additional $956,573 to fully fund this budget and meet the needs of our students and staff. Concludes our formal presentation of the superintendent's proposed FY20 budget plan. Dr. Herron, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you, Ms. Ewan and staff, for presenting this morning, and if you have any other questions, we'd be happy to address them at this time.
I have one question. I don't expect it to be addressed at this time, but maybe somebody could do some background research on this. It looks like over the past 4 years or so, the student enrollment has been virtually flat. But the population of special education students in that same 4-year period has increased by 21%. In the 5 years prior to that, when the student population increased overall by more than 7%, the special education population only increased about 1.4%. The question is that trend similar to our comparable school systems? And if not, it's a fact. I mean, we have to address the needs of these students. We have to accommodate them. But is there something else going on here that we're not aware of that might be changing these numbers? It would be helpful to know.
Yeah, I think we probably can address a piece of that this morning, Ms. Bourgeois, because some of that growth is coming in a certain area.
Good morning again. We have tried to assess some of that across the divisions, and we used the 2016-17 compared it to 2017-18 because we don't have all the December 1 counts for this year for all the school divisions. And we looked at all of our Region 2, and we are seeing similar trends. Some are not quite as large as ours, but almost all of them have shown increases. But we're also seeing a large increase in the number of our younger students that are being identified, and that's having a significant impact, that we're identifying them at a younger age and at a greater pace. So, you know, the numbers that I shared before, that's where a significant amount of our increase has been. The 65% increase in the age 2 category and the 20% increase in the developmental delay category is 65 students.
Let me just follow up. Identified. Obviously, there's testing, there's some analysis of that particular student. Have we changed how we categorize them? Have the standards changed over the past 10 years? It's all
The regulations are established by the state, and those were last done in 2009. There's actually, there are very specific criteria, and there's actually, as part of the eligibility process, there's a worksheet for each disability category that the state of Virginia recognizes that has to be completed to show that the student qualifies under that disability category. So there is a pretty specific process. With the K-12 eligibilities that we spoke of earlier, the 106 new students, that was 106 students found eligible out of 140 evaluation process, 47 evaluation processes.
I just ask a couple of questions about slide number 4, which is the General Assembly's fiscal year 20 budget. First of all, it does show that the state is increasing funding by 4.5%. But I'd just like to draw attention to the fact that the vast majority of that is coming from the sales tax. And my understanding is that the sales tax is money that's given to the locality in support of their efforts in education, but not mandated that it go to schools. It's a local decision that was made to donate, to devote that funding to our schools, more or less. And I only say that because I just want to separate that from the money that the state really gives us. And from that perspective, I note that there's a reduction in the standards of quality this year funding, and that much of the gain is in categorical incentive. Is that salary related? Is it salary increase related?
Yes, sir. That's the 5% over the biennium, and that's where most of that is, plus the additional 1.5 counselors.
So while we sort of ought to think of that as kind of the base funding, it's conditional in this instance on localities providing a total of 5% salary increases over a 2-year period.
Correct, sir.
So that was kind of interesting to me. I did just want to highlight one aspect of this. Say that when we look at the amount of revenue that the schools have experienced over the years, and not a criticism of our schools at all, I don't think it's a criticism of our local governments, it's a criticism of the state. When we look at the funding that the state has been providing, other than that sales tax money, which is not really, they're driving it. Basically, we're talking about it's just ticked over $35 million. Well, 10 years ago, it was $33 million. And recognize that in the city of Williamsburg, there's been about a $3 million increase in a much smaller base amount of funding, so a much higher percentage increase from the city of Williamsburg, and James City County, well over $20 million of additional revenue. And I just think it's important for us to highlight that, to make it clear to the General Assembly that they're failing in their responsibility to keep up with funding, and to just think about what we would be able to do if the state had maintained their effort to provide assistance to education. We would be able to talk about a dramatic enhancement of our public education system to deal with the atrocious levels of salaries that Virginia teachers are expected to live under, and to engage in very innovative programs to directly address some of the serious problems that obviously our school system, like every other, is encountering right now. So I borrowed Jim's soapbox for a minute.
Well,
but,
let me also add to you, too, we had 1,000 fewer students and we had $33 million in funding.
Right, exactly, right, yeah. So, you know, I mean, I understand there are complicated factors going into that formula, but essentially you're chasing the same number of dollars we did 10 years ago, and it's really aggregate. One other question about the English learners, because we have had this significant increase. Are we tracking the effect of this support for English learners and finding whether it's producing significant improvements through a student's time? Students coming in at the kindergarten level and starting to get some enhancement. By the time they reach that third grade, have they improved significantly in their ability to handle the English language? Are we getting more people coming in laterally with weak English skills? How quickly are they catch up in their ability?
Well, as most of you know, if you get students that come to us when they're younger, they're sponges, and so they make a lot more progress. We're trying lots of different innovative techniques with them, both in the classroom and pulling out, and we're seeing a lot of progress. Our biggest challenge is when we receive students that are in the middle school and high school, and they come to us maybe with a third grade education in their native language. And so playing catch-up to get them learning English in the amount of time that we have prior to graduation has created a lot of strain and struggle on both our classroom teachers and our English ESL teachers. We are trying intensive one-on-one work. We're working on electronic programs. We are doing pull-out. We're trying to involve families. But the real cause of our deficit is getting students that come to us that just have very, very little background knowledge.
And if I might add to that, the new accountability system has a huge focus on progress, and part of that is the progress of English learners, and we will actually get credit for progress made by English learners in the new accountability system, which I think is very significant.
Does that translate into funding?
I wish. I wish.
Are you kidding?
We'll ask for more money.
So we get credit for the progress, but also after a student that comes to us as an English language learner, no matter upon the level, within a year they're required to take the SOLs and count towards our total results. And so that's a significant challenge when you get the more high school and middle school students that you get are taking those SOLs.
So are we finding, are we catching more students earlier than we did before, or is it a population that's moving into our area that, is it our citizens that are here now that we're doing things differently than we did 10 years ago, and we're catching students earlier and identifying these issues as far as learning disabilities, or is it a group that's moving into our area that we're finding there's, just for our board knowledge, so we can kind of figure out, where we are on, is it, and is it one area in the county, or is it countywide? And I'm sure it's probably countywide. And let me state too that the program y'all have set up and in place for this and catch them early is wonderful. I've been in the classrooms with some of these, and the teachers that are working on the students and helping them get through the hurdles that they have to get through to learn differently than others, and it could be just that. The staff is wonderful how they handle that and work with it. It's amazing to watch them, what they do.
I think the numbers are increasing steadily, but yes, there are more English learners in some schools than others, and when we provide the extra staffing, that staffing follows the numbers of students, so we have the resources in the right place to meet the needs of students.
Okay. Thank you.
Could ask for the material in advance. I feel like I have to show I read it. Could I just get a better sense of why headings on a number of these are mandatory essential, and what the distinction is being called?
Basically, some of the staffing is required by SOQ. For example, the special education, all of the additions there. The English learners extra staffing is not SOQ directed. We are actually following a needs model instead to better support our students. So some are mandated and some are essential for our success. Because we look at our gaps in our student achievement, those are two areas, and the state drives one, but we feel as a division, we've got to drive the other.
I guess the only comment I'd make about that would, it in some ways would be helpful to have the mandatory ones sort of lined up and just
Sure.
basically, once again, so that we have something to bring to our legislators and the governor and say, you know, we're doing this because you've told us to do it. Now, where's the help in doing it? And even when, of course, even when they're telling us to do something, they're only going to pay for that portion of it that's not covered by the LCI.
We can certainly provide that because it's good information to have, and I believe out of the number of positions, how many are mandatory, Miss Yu? And I know we looked at that yesterday.
Including the council? 13 and a half.
13. And we get a small portion of the money towards those positions.
And as you say, John, it's kind of disingenuous to say, you know, we funded a 5% pay raise when it's really, we funded a third of a 5% pay raise. And expect the localities to pay for the rest of it.
Now, on enrollment history, K through 12, it looks like from 17 to 19, we've gone down just a little, but it looks like we're kind of staying level in that category. Is that what I'm seeing? And do we have a projection of years to come? I know that's a crystal ball thing because it depends on how many subdivisions we put through and how fast they're built, how our enrollment changes.
I missed the first part of the question, but basically the enrollment projections are 99% something accurate.
Right.
And they continue to be so. The low projections, we've been right on target for a number of years. Obviously, we as three bodies, we will look at that every single year to see if there's any changes that begin to take place.
And you hear through, you know, all kinds of things that schools shutting down, and I know ours is robust and our economy is growing wonderfully. But it looks like in the last 3 years, projecting 2019, we're going to be about even, steady with what we've had up to this point with projections as far as enrollment.
That's correct, sir. We are flatlined for the moment, and then we start to go up again. We do have a small class moving through that drops our numbers, and then they start to go up again. But we're in a position to begin to catch up with facilities that we haven't been in before.
And another question on Bright Beginnings. I know that Dr. McGlinnan had asked about, you know, last year in our meeting was possibly having a different outlook. John, you can help me on this as far as, you know, having Bright Beginnings in their own buildings and being able to maybe be on campus and maybe not, didn't know exactly what it would look like. And would that free up room in our existing schools in order to, you know, do both? I think Bright Beginnings is a very important component of what we're doing as far as our students and getting them all the way through graduation. And if we catch them early, you know, that is very key. You know, they are sponges.
I think there are several reasons why Bright Beginnings works well within the traditional elementary school. I may ask Mr. Thorpe to maybe make a few more comments on that for us.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you.
One of our thoughts in continuing to have Bright Beginnings in our elementary schools has been to minimize transitions for kids. The research is clear that minimizing transitions helps to support students' academic success. Additionally, if we were to have one pre-K center and continue to serve students 2 through 4, we would have the inevitability of having 2- and 3-year-olds on the bus for over 30, maybe 45 minutes. That has not seemed developmentally appropriate, but your point is well taken, that's definitely a consideration.
Yeah, I just would add on to that. Thank you, Mike, for bringing that up. I've not suggested one pre-K center, but
Right.
rather that we might think about having some facilities that are specifically designed for pre-K kids. Opportunities, I think, to put in facilities that are really geared toward children, many of whom may have special education needs as well that have to be addressed at that level. Certainly nobody wants to put a kid on a school bus in Toano and run them all the way into the city, for instance, to a facility, but having perhaps 2 or 3 state-of-the-art facilities scheduled around may give us both the ability to provide a better experience for those kids and at the same time alleviate some of the pressure on elementary schools' facility needs. I think that from my perspective, what I'd just like to see is a serious examination of that as we look at elementary needs. And quite honestly, I had a chance to talk to Dr. Beers a little bit about this beforehand. Frankly, I don't see the great value in potentially having a child in the same building for 8 years. I understand the desire not to have children moved around a lot during the 6 years of elementary school or the 3 years of high school. But the value of having somebody in one location for 8 years does escape me. I just passed. I did spend 9 years in my elementary school. A certain group of ladies who had the ability to exercise an unusual amount of discipline and had the option of removing you from enrollment in that particular facility at will. So.
Thank you, sir.
That doesn't occur in Bright Beginnings. Make that clear. Interesting.
I have 2 questions. Could you explain, especially for the public, the difference in terms of roles and responsibilities, the security officer versus the deputized or sworn school resource officer, why we need both positions?
The SRO position is a part of our local police forces, obviously, and they are armed and they're not full-time in our building. They're not employed by the school system. They are in and out of our buildings and are a resource to be there in case of an emergency and to build community relationships with the students. The school officer, the security officer, is on site all of the time, monitoring games, monitoring many other things as well, and they also build relationships with students and are walking the building hourly to keep the building secure. One is armed and one is not, and one's employed by us and one is not.
And would you also be saying that the security officer would be more enforcing school regulations?
That's correct.
Whereas it allows the school resource officer to not have to get involved in every school
Yes, the
rules
school
and
resource
regulations.
officer would not be involved in school discipline, and actually the administration mostly takes care of that.
The second question is, could you address the use of volunteers? In other words, what's the effective FTE in terms of the volunteers that we have in the system, and how do we use them, and how do we effectively coordinate the volunteers?
We have volunteers throughout our whole system. We have volunteers to help with reading, we have volunteers to help with copying papers, almost everything, and they're in every single school, and they're actually, they volunteer at the school level, they volunteer at the system level. They come in and out, they're not employed by the division, obviously, but they provide an incredible resource to our schools.
And how do you effectively manage the volunteers? Because that's one of the criticism I hear when I suggest to the city, let's use more volunteers, and it's the management of them. So how does the school district do that?
I think each school has a process for using volunteers, bringing them in and out, and allocating them where they're needed in the building. For example, we have some retirement groups who come in and read to our students on a weekly basis. So someone at the school level has to manage each volunteer activity and know when the volunteers are coming and going. So it does take some management at the school level. I'll give you an example. I was at a school yesterday and they have a math coach that's been volunteering in the school for 15 years. comes in, works 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 3 days coming up to SOLs, and literally coaches math 3 days a week at this time of the year. There's a schedule that has to be orchestrated for that person. So it involves work at the school level, but it's well worth it because of the resources we have in our community.
Yeah, but as far as meeting educational needs, they are not trained, they are not under the management of our school system. So for them to meet the needs of educational requirements of our students, I think is a little bit of a stretch.
But would you say that they're important to delivering, achieving your mission?
I would say important. They're important towards that. It's also important for community involvement and community engagement with our schools. So the volunteers, while they do take resources to manage, I don't know that they are a substitute for a teacher assistant, a teacher, or administrator. But I do also believe it's very important to have community engagement and involvement in our schools.
That might be a good metric, in the future presentations, when we're benchmarking, how do we benchmark our effective FTE and volunteers against the other jurisdictions, and how are we performing there? Also, I think it would be helpful to use the same benchmarks. It seems like when we compare different things, we're seeing different benchmark school districts. It would be nice to have them all up there for every comparison.
Yeah, for the most part, we benchmark against like divisions who are similar to us in demographics. We have a group that we benchmark against for academics and several other things, and then we benchmark against our region as well, who are not like us as a school system. Where we introduced some different benchmarks today was quite purposeful, because when we look at security officers, we would be benchmarking against rural systems, and we are not a rural system, and so we brought in some other comparisons there as well. But for the most part, we have a set group of schools that we benchmark against.
Thank you.
Going to assistant principals in the secondary schools, I see that the comparison is that, I know it's like our schools, but are those schools larger and require more assistant principals to, handle those schools and handle the needs of the schools? Or is that the same size school that we have? And I see Hampton's got 4 to 5, and on average 2 to 3. Is that the same size schools that we have? And is there, question number one is, would it be the same size? Question number two would be, is there a problem at maybe a school that we've picked that are an area that have more need and have to than what we have in James City County as far as, maybe a more gentle neighborhood?
Yeah, I believe the sizes of the schools are quite similar. Some of the demographics of the schools may be a little different. Having just one assistant principal at the middle school is an incredible challenge with about 800 students. And so, for example, we're going out, we've already posted the principalship of James Blair for next year, and we have candidates that we are trying to go out and recruit who won't come because we've only one assistant principal. So you want to have enough supervision within the building so that the principal can focus on instruction and not constantly be doing discipline all day long. So we are grossly understaffed at our middle schools, and it's very stressful for the administration and very hard to attract good candidates into our pool.
Thank you. Good answer. Thank you.
Okay, trying to keep us on track. I hate to stop the conversation, but we have another bullet point. We wanted to spend some time talking about our CIP. And so, Dr. Heron, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Yes, we have a very short presentation by request this morning just to revisit our elementary school, the request from elementary school and some of the rationale behind that. And Mr. Thorpe, as most of this is educationally focused, is going to begin that presentation this morning. Once Mr. Thorpe has finished, Mr. Stevens has a couple of slides to present this morning as well.
Good morning again. The purpose of this very brief presentation is to share the data, the rationale that informed recommendations from our long-range planning committee as well as our capital improvement planning committee for an addition to our capital improvement plan. And so we're going to start, this is School Board Resolution 1918. I believe all of our groups have a similar resolution that recognizes that when enrollment capacity reaches 85%, we're going to start having a conversation, evaluating the needs and solutions to address that capacity issue. And when school capacities reach 90%, essentially we take action. This is a slide that we shared earlier this year, and this is our projected enrollment versus capacity for our elementary schools. This includes pre-kindergarten, and it's using the low projection. Our long-range planning committee and our capital improvement planning committee considered research related to ideal school sizes with respect to elementary school, and one of our main thoughts was we don't want a huge elementary school. As a modification to our capital improvement plan, we added a new elementary school, and one of the purposes of the bullets is if we were to remove pre-kindergarten from our enrollment and therefore impacting our capacity, we're still above the trigger point. We're at 91.8%. Included there is the estimated cost. This is a slide that we had shared with the board earlier in the fall. This slide has been updated with current information. And speaking of our benchmark school divisions, these are benchmark school divisions. These are our peer groups. They have similar enrollments, similar operating budgets, similar demographics. And what we can see there is their number of schools and their average enrollment and their current capacities and for elementary. Part of the discussion in our long-range planning committee when evaluating the pros and cons and the different options to address the elementary school capacity concerns, we were really having very robust discussions around school expansion versus the addition of a new school. This is a typical elementary lunch schedule, and it may look different in high school where you may be able to bring in a whole group of kids and they stay for 20 or 30 minutes and then take them out. At the elementary level, this is very typical where we roll them in, and we've got students in our elementary schools coming in 11:10, 11:15, leaving after 1:30. And so if we were to expand onto an elementary school without expanding its core, what may happen is we may have lunch shifts that begin well before 11 o'clock and then end at or around 2 o'clock. And I'll remind you that our Tier 3 schools, we've got breakfast until 9:25 a.m. We set up our master schedules around learning. Most of our elementary classrooms begin with a 90 or 120-minute literacy block. We don't want to break those up. And then additionally, I know in our strategic plan, our priorities of learning and achievement and school safety are all throughout our 6 goals. If we were to expand onto a school and then not address, for instance, playgrounds, then we would be forced to either have recess starting very early in the morning, or we would have many, many more kids on the recess area at the same time. And again, there could be student safety concerns there. These are the slides that we wanted to share with you with respect to the conversations and data and rationale and research that informed the CIP recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe.
Dr. Heron, I don't know how to advance the slides, but if somebody would take care, they'll be pretty quick. I do want to say good morning, and I appreciate Dr. Heron allowing me a few minutes to share some information with you this morning. James City County's budget process runs a little behind the City of Williamsburg and the school system, so our Board of Supervisors has not had the opportunity to review or comment on what I plan to share today. But as a staff, we have spent much of the last 4 weeks working to balance the county budget, and my recommended budget will be published in the next 2 weeks, or March 29th. And so with that in mind, I didn't want to pass on the opportunity to share where I think we will be as a county with this group, particularly for school board members. I didn't want you to have us in a room together today and then 2 weeks from now say, well, why didn't they tell us something? So at least I wanted to share a little bit about where we are in our budget process and how it's looking for us. I would like to mention, as a relative newcomer to the community, I continue to be very impressed with the interagency interaction that occurs throughout the peninsula on a regular basis, and in particular with Williamsburg, the school system, and James City County. I do think that matters a lot. From our joint board meetings, to the liaison meetings, to the long-range planning committee, to our school tours, to the regular interaction between the Williamsburg city manager and the superintendent and I really do think we are working towards a betterment for our school system and the community. We have heightened cooperation and I think a better understanding of where each of us is coming from, and not that we're against one another, that we are working in concert trying to serve the community the best we can. As your staff, we hope that we can continue to grow again next year as we plan for the best outcomes for the school system. I think we all agree that's important for our community. I believe I believe that by better understanding the needs and challenges of the entire community, it all helps us make better long-term decisions. So on this slide, where I wanted to share, as part of that understanding, a very high level of our county overview process. James City County adopts a 2-year budget, and we're on year 2. So we had a plan that we discussed in detail last year, and most of our review on a staff side has been around what is different from the planned amount that was discussed a year ago. For FY 2020, our planned operating budget was $209 million, of which the school system is $109 or almost $110 million, and the county is about $99 for our general fund services. Our planned 2020 budget had an increase in revenues of $3.2 million, so that is what we projected a year ago, and that seems to be holding true. We're projecting another $1.4 million increase, so overall, as James City County, we have about $4.6 million in general fund revenues to work with compared to our fiscal year 2019 budget. So that's good news. Sounds like a lot of money, but it's a 2.2% increase. So it's not significantly in terms of keeping up with CPI and other things, so there's still some challenges for us. We have budgeted all of our anticipated revenues. And again, we'll have some savings as we fully fund something that doesn't spend the full amount in a year's time, but we are budgeting all our revenues. So there are no more revenues for us to pull from without an increase in fees or property taxes or things of that nature. So without more money, our challenge, which many of us understand, is which of the needs, because I do believe their needs, are recommended for funding. If you'd move me to slide 2, please. This slide is really just with that little bit of background. I do expect my recommended budget to show $2.2 million more for county general fund related expenditures and $2.4 million more for the school system related expenditures from the county side. So that's not the city part of it, and the final numbers we'll have out to you very soon. But that's the operating budget side. And I just wanted a very high level. So the good news is there is more money. The bad news is it won't be enough to fund everything that our county departments need or that the school system probably is looking for from the county as well. Would like to move to slide 3. In terms of the capital projects, we have more specifics here. As we had conversations back in December, we've had a lot more conversation going on over the past month about these kinds of things. And for us, within the capital projects funds, our funding comes from our general fund appropriation, which the county does, as well as sometimes outside grants that we're able to obtain, and then local borrowing. And where we have worked to ensure over this 5-year plan is that these items that are there, that one, we can afford them. And again, things could change. The economy could be significantly different in a year or two, but based on where we are today and looking forward, we believe that things within the county's 5-year plan could be funded. So from that standpoint, we do that within our departments, and we've done that within the school system as well. I guess the good news here, at least from where I sit, and I think Williamsburg has had some discussion along this as well, that we're recommending everything the school system has requested in the capital improvement plan to be funded in the next 5 years. We have shifted some around, but at least we have your 5-year look. We have included all of those items within the 5-year plan. I do want to at least talk through the slide just to make sure you can see what's there on screen. It's a little harder to see that in person. For the school, for the county side, and these numbers shown here are going to be what the school system requested of us minus one that I'll point out. But Clara Baker and Laura Lane, we were moving back to the plan of what we had approved last year. That was in our plan a year ago. It's what the school system had requested, so it was changing it back to a year. So I know that's not what was requested in the current year from the school system, but that was where we pushed those two items back. As we move down to a division-wide funding change, the reduction really there, I think the request was around $410,000. It would reduce the request to $222,000. That is just the county number. So I apologize for that being a little confusing. It was hard to figure out how to best show that. But that $163,000 reduction is a reduction for the county side. And again, the total to the school system would go from $410,000 to $422,000. And then as we move below that, the new elementary school, we did push that 3 years. Again, from a standpoint of us, one, finding a site, the funding side of it, but going through a borrowing cycle for all of those reasons, 3 years we can build to. A year from now, where it moved from pretty far out in the CIP into the 5-year plan, and to be next year presented some challenges, I believe, for Williamsburg as well as the county in meeting that schedule. So we're not saying it's not needed. We were just trying to push it out to where we have some time to find a site and work through the details of that and plan for a borrowing. Because for the county side of it, our recommendation would be that we would borrow funds for that expansion. Start the design at War Hill and then put the construction out a year for each of the high school expansions, but continue to have them where the design and construction would play out over the next 2 to 3 years in terms of CIP. With that, I would, any questions in terms of information sharing for me?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the thought that you've put into this, and that coming to a common understanding about what the need is, and likewise us understanding the financial constraints. But normally when we push things out, the numbers change a little bit, they go up a little bit, so I'm not sure if that.
I didn't incorporate number changes. The superintendent pointed that out. I absolutely agree.
okay.
I just didn't want to change numbers too much and have folks confused in that.
Fair enough.
But on our standpoint, if we're pushing them out there, we can make those adjustments from the county side in terms of funding.
Okay, so that doesn't change your thinking about the
It
final
doesn't
amount.
change my way of thinking. For the county side, we're going to borrow those dollars on the construction side, so it ups the level of borrowing some, which over a period of 15 or 20 years of a repayment is fairly insignificant.
Thank you.
But it's a great point, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
And on the shift with the elementary school, it may also be worth noting that between 2021 and 2024, the elementary student enrollment actually is projected to be going down. So it's important for every student to have a quality learning experience, but there's not a level of urgency with a steep rise in the elementary school population over that 3-year period.
Yes, sir. At least that was what we had thought, at least some on our side as well, not just the practicality of making it happen that quick, but that as well. Other questions? Well, again, Dr. Herron, Madam Chair, I would like to say I really do appreciate the cooperation and ongoing discussions. I do think that benefits all of us in doing that, and we'll continue to build to best serve the students here as well. So thank you.
If there are no additional questions or comments, keeping to our 10:30 schedule, we can move to adjourn. So I will adjourn the Williamsburg-Jamestown County School.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Ms.
Sorry.
Ruth?
Yeah,
Ms. Larson?
Yes, I am very cold in here. Might be some efficiencies found by turning down the temperature. Just kidding. I know, don't sick that gentleman on me. So just a couple of comments. I'm going to be nowhere near as eloquent as Dr. McGlennon is. I've got 15 years of frustration sitting in me over the actions that happen in Richmond, and I don't know how to change it, because it has not changed in 15 years that I've been in this process. But I really do think it's important that we try to continue the conversation and we figure out something that we can do. I mean, we went up and we do our General Assembly Day. We have a fairly good relationship, I think, with our legislators, and we get the, oh, yeah, how you doing, well, how we're doing is not too great. But we don't seem to get any traction about the very real need that we have. And now you're going to, these are all wonderful things and important things, but they're not going to be all funded. And so here we go again, pushing some, so I think we really need to put some thought, and perhaps that's something that we can continue the conversation on at the liaison level, on what are some ways that we might, we've got other school divisions that we've listed in here. Is there a coalition we can put together? What can we do to try to get something other than lip service and get some real change at the Richmond? Because the buck stops here, and it's not our legislators that are getting the hassle at the grocery store, and that's part of the deal, and I get that, but we are sort of powerless to do anything about it. And so we need to find some power in what we're able to do. The other thing that I did want to bring up before we adjourned was that I have been contacted because of several articles in the paper regarding homelessness. There was also we received an email from a gentleman whose church had talked about the number of WJCC families that are food challenged. And I know that is not in, that how to solve the issue, the homelessness is something we've been working on with workforce housing, and I know the city is working there as well. But I did not want people to think that we were not engaged and aware of that situation. And any information that you might be able just to pass along to us on things that are being done, not for input, but just for information purposes, would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, Mrs. Larson, what we'll do is we'll make it an agenda item at the next liaison meeting, present the information, then push it out to all three governing bodies.
Thank you. And I won't interrupt again, sorry.
Any additional thoughts or questions before I move to adjourn? Okay. This meeting of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board is now adjourned.
Do you have a motion to adjourn Williamsburg City Council meeting?
Motion adjourned.
Second? Ms. Burcham?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey? Aye. Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons? Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
And look for a motion to adjourn the, what are we, supervisors? Mr. Stevens?
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson? Mr. McGlennon? Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
That's amazing. I was sitting there at 10:10 going, no way.
We did it.